Hello, friends. We have started different videos on the chapter of national income accounting. In fact, in the last videos, what we have done is like we have discussed the concepts like the four major economic sectors. Like we have discussed the concepts of circular flow of incomes and expenditures. We have also discussed the concept of the four factors of production. We started discussions over the definition of national income, where national income is defined as the total money value of all final goods and services which are being produced by the residents of a country over a period. Now we started discussions over the different terms which is being mentioned in the definition, and we have discussed like what exactly the term over a period means, like what are the flow variables, what are the stock variables. We have also discussed what is the meaning of money value, so the quantity of product of something multiplied by the price. And in fact, the national income is being classified into two types based on money value, which is known as national income at current year prices, and which is real national income or national income at constant prices. So these are certain things which we have done. We have also discussed what is base year. We have discussed what is national income deflator. So these are the different things which we have covered with regards to the chapter of national income accounting. Now in this video we are going to discuss the concepts which is like within the definition you might be knowing it. The national income is defined as the total money value of all final goods and services. Now we need to work up upon what exactly final goods and services ante enti. Now in this video we are going to talk like the concept of intermediate and final goods. So this is the topic. సో రిమెంబర్, ఎప్పుడైతే మనం ఇంటర్మీడియట్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ ఫైనల్ గూడ్స్ అన్నాము అంటే యూ హ్యాస్ టు ఆల్సో అండర్స్టాండ్ దట్ లైక్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ సర్వీసెస్ అనేది నువ్వు అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి, విచ్ మీన్స్ లైక్ ఇంటర్మీడియట్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ సర్వీసెస్, final goods and services. This is the point which we has to understand. Now what are intermediate goods? Now intermediate goods mean these are such kind of goods that are being used to make another good, but in the process of making another good, these goods like they lose their identity. So intermediate goods mean these are such kind of goods that are being used in producing another goods, but in the process they lose their identity. Or we can also call it as intermediate goods are such kind of goods that are used up in producing another good. So this is the definition of intermediate good. Now let us understand intermediate good with an example. Now for example, ఇప్పుడు ఒక బేకర్ ఉన్నాడు. Now this baker ఇతను ఏం చేశాడంటే he starts like producing the bread. Now to produce this bread, now he used wheat flour. సో ఇప్పుడు ఈ వీట్ ఫ్లోర్ను వాడినటువంటి బేకర్, నౌ వీట్ ఫ్లోర్ ఈజ్ నౌ బీయింగ్ యూజ్ టు మేక్ ఇన్ టు బ్రెడ్. Now I can call wheat flour as an intermediate good. Why? Because what are intermediate goods? Intermediate goods are such kind of goods that are being used to make another good. In this case ఇక్కడ బ్రెడ్ తయారైంది, but in the process of making another good, these intermediate goods they lose their identity, which means like once the bread is being manufactured, once the bread is being produced, ఆటోమేటిక్గా వీట్ ఫ్లోర్ తన యొక్క ఒరిజినల్ ఐడెంటిటీ ఏదైతే ఉందో బ్రెడ్ తయారైన తర్వాత నౌ ఇట్ హ్యాస్ లూజన్ ఇట్స్ ఐడెంటిటీ. సో దిస్ ఈస్ ద పాయింట్ విచ్ వీ హ్యాస్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ విత్ రిగార్డ్స్ టు ఇంటర్మీడియట్ గూడ్స్. Now once we have understood the concept of intermediate goods, now let us understand the what exactly final goods are. Now let us understand. Now when it comes to the definition of final goods, in fact the final goods definition itself has two parts. Now what is the first part of the first definition of final good? So the first part of final good ఏంటంటే final goods are such kind of goods that are consumed finally by households or government. So if any good that is being consumed finally either by households or government, then we can call such a type of goods are such type of goods are known as like the final goods. So the first definition of final good ఏంటంటే ఏదైనా ఒక good that is being consumed finally. We know that households and the government, they has like the consumer nature. So if any good that is being consumed finally, we can call it as like the final good. For example, ఇందాక ఎగ్జాంపుల్లో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇప్పుడు బేక్ షాప్ వెళ్ళి నౌ ఇఫ్ యూ హ్యావ్ పర్చేస్డ్ బ్రెడ్, now since the bread is like you have consumed finally, I can call it as bread as final good. For example, take the example of marker is also a final good because it is consumed finally. I can call it as like the board is also an example for like the board is also an example for final good. Now one point we have to understand is that all those final goods which are consumed finally, such final goods are technically referred as consumer goods and services, which means like suppose if you recharge your mobile, that is a consumer service because it is consumed finally. Suppose if you like you are taking the services of the education, that is a consumer service. Suppose if you visit a hospital, then that is a consumer service. So if any final good that is consumed finally, then we can call it as consumer goods and services. So that is the first type of final good which you has to understand. Now what is the second type of final good which you has to understand? The second type of final goods, or the second definition of final good, is that final goods are such kind of goods that are being used to produce another goods, but in the process they don't lose identity. So when it comes to intermediate goods, these are such a kind of goods that are being used to make another good, like the wheat flour. When it is being used to make bread, it has loosened its identity. But one type of definition of final good is that these are such kind of goods that are being used to make another good, but in the process they don't lose identity. Now let us take the example. Now you might be knowing the machine like Xerox machine. Now Xerox machine can be called as the final good, which means like this Xerox machine is being used to make another good. But once the good is being made, then you can also make another goods with where the Xerox machine is not losing its identity. So this is the point which you has to keep in mind. Now all those final goods that are being used to make another goods, but in the process they doesn't lose their identity, such final goods are referred as capital goods. So final goods are divided into two types. One is known as consumer good and the second one is known as capital goods. What are consumer goods? These are consumed finally. What are capital goods? These are goods used by firms to make another goods, but in the process they don't lose their identity. Capital. So when I use the term capital, the same capital term which I have used in four factors of production. I have told that capital means long-term man-made inputs to the production. The same capital which I am also using here. So capital goods antamu. So these are certain points which we have to understand with regards to intermediate goods and like the final goods. Now let us understand one more important concept in connection to this topic. అదేంటంటే now let us understand. For example, wheat flour is used to make bread. Now I can call wheat flour as an intermediate good. Now I can, if the bread is being purchased by you or by any household, then I can call how bread as the final good, and within the final good it is the consumer good. Now bread becomes the consumer good. Now let us understand, if the same bread is being purchased by a restaurant, ఒక రెస్టారెంట్ వాళ్ళు బ్రెడ్ పర్చేస్ చేశారు. Now this bread is being used to make certain like sandwiches. So a bread ఏదైతే ఉందో తీసుకొని then it is being made into certain sandwiches. Now in this case, bread is considered to be an intermediate good. Why? Because bread is being used by the restaurant, and in the process it is being used to make another good, and now bread has loosened its identity. At least certain identity it has been lost. Now that is why bread is an intermediate good. So one conclusion which we has to understand from this point is that what can be an final good for some entity can be an intermediate to some other entity. So bread is a final good for one entity, which is households, but the same bread becomes intermediate to some other entity, which is firm. So this is the first conclusion which we have to understand. So what can be a final good for some entity? For example, if the same bread is being bought by the government, then bread becomes the final good or consumer good for the government. But when the same bread is being used by the, like certain restaurants, then it becomes the intermediate. So what can be a final good for some entity? Then it can also be the intermediate good for some other entity. This is the point which you have to keep in mind. Now let us take one more example which we have to understand. Now the second example is like, for example, we have a car manufacturing company that has manufactured car. Now, if the car is being bought by a household, now when the car is being bought by the household, then we can call it as like the consumer good. Then it is a final good, and in within the final good, we can call it as a consumer good because car has been consumed finally by a particular household. Now imagine if the same car is bought by a taxi driver. Now this car is being used by the taxi driver to provide services like ఎవరైనా ఓలా లాంటిదో లేకపోతే ర్యాపిడోనో లేకపోతే ఊబరో ఇటువంటి సర్వీసెస్ ఇవ్వడానికి now this car has been brought. Now this is not a consumer good because this is not consumed finally. Now what ఇక్కడ ఈ కేసులో కార్ ఏమైంది? Now what is capital good? These are such kind of good that are being used to produce another good. I have already told whenever we use the term good, we can also use like in connection the services. So this good is being used to provide another like services which is known as taxi services. So now when the services are being provided, now the car doesn't loses its identity. Hence we can call it as like the one type of final good which is known as capital good. Now by this example what we can understand is that like which type of final good depends on the purpose for which it is being used or the purpose or the person who it has been bought. ఇప్పుడు అదే కారు హౌస్ హోల్డ్స్ కొంటే ఇట్ బికమ్ కన్స్యూమర్ గుడ్, అదే కారు టాక్సీ డ్రైవర్ కొంటే నౌ ఇట్ బికమ్స్ ద క్యాపిటల్ గుడ్. సో విచ్ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఫైనల్ గుడ్ అనేది దేని మీద డిపెండ్ అవుతుందంటే ఫర్ ద పర్పస్ ఫర్ విచ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ బీయింగ్ యూజ్. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, if you buy like the refrigerator for your home, that becomes the consumer good. If the same refrigerator is being bought for like providing certain cool drinks to other one, then it becomes like the capital good. So this is the second conclusion which we have to understand. So first one, what can be an intermediate final good to some other entity can be an intermediate to some other entity, and which type of final good depends on the purpose for which it is being used. So these are certain points which we have to understand with regards to intermediate goods and like the final goods. Now let us continue the topic. Now one point which we have understood from the definition of national income is that national income is defined as the total money value of all final goods and services, which means in national income calculation intermediate goods value is being ignored, or in national income calculation only the value of final goods is being taken into consideration, and we ignore the intermediate goods value. This is the point. Now why do we ignore the value of intermediate goods? Now we ignore the value of intermediate goods to avoid the problem of double counting. So to avoid the problem of double counting, we ignore intermediate goods and we just consider the value of final goods. Now the question is, what is double counting? Double counting means counting the same value like a more like twice. So double counting and okay value two times count, just we used to call this double counting. Now how intermediate goods inclusion may lead to double counting? For example, suppose we have one company that has manufactured steel. Now the value of steel is like 200. Now when the steel is being bought by a car company, now the steel is being used and the car is being manufactured. Imagine 1000 rupees is the value of the car and 200 rupees is the value of steel. Now if you look at, if I want to calculate the national income, so steel, the value of steel is 200 the value of car is 1,000, then I can write it as 200 is the value of the national income. This is the point which we can conclude. But when the steel is being bought by the car, and the value of steel, which is 200, is inbuilt in the value of car. So it means when the steel is bought by the car company, I have calculated the value of steel, and when the same car is being manufactured, now the value of steel is counted second time, because the value of steel is included in the value of car, which is 1,000. So that is why we has to subtract the value of steel, which is an intermediate for the car making company. Then if we subtract the value of steel, then it becomes 800. So if I want to calculate the national income, 200 is the value of steel plus 800 is the value of car, which is 1,000 is the value of national income. So it means like, if we calculate or if we add the value of intermediate goods, if it is leading to the problem of double counting. So ఇక్కడ కార్ 1000 లో ఉన్న 200 ప్లస్ స్టీల్ లో ఉన్న 200 మళ్ళీ మనం యాడ్ చేస్తా ఉన్నాం. దిస్ ఇస్ ద పాయింట్. బట్ ఇఫ్ యు లుక్ ఎట్ ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, we have steel company. Now to manufacture this steel, ఐరన్ ఓర్ కంపెనీ నుంచి వీళ్ళు ఐరన్ ఓర్ తీసుకున్నారు. ఇమాజిన్ ద వాల్యూ ఆఫ్ ఐరన్ ఓర్ ఇస్ 100. Now this iron ore is being used. Now by using this iron ore, 200 rupees value of steel is being like taken in, like they have manufactured. Now this steel is being used by the car making company, and it has made the value of like a car which is worth of 1,000. Now if someone asks to calculate the national income, then you can write it as 100 plus 200 plus 1,000. So it is giving us the value of like 1,300 rupees is the national income value that is being coming up. But in reality, when the iron ore is being manufactured, when it is being sold to steel company, 100 rupees value is being added. Now the same 100 is being included in the value of steel, and the same 100 is also included in the value of car. It means in reality, it is not only leading to double counting. In reality, it is leading to multiple counting. Multiple counting means counting the same value more times. So we have calculated the value of iron ore. Now we have also added the value of iron ore when it is inbuilt in the steel, and the same iron ore value is also being found in the value of car. So it is leading to the multiple counting problem. So it is not just the double counting, it is leading to the multiple counting problem. So that is why while calculating national income, we ignore the value of intermediate goods. If we add the value of intermediate goods, the value of national income might get exaggerated. So one conclusion which we has to draw from this point is that, so in national income accounting, anything that leads to the problem of double counting, we should not include. For example, you might be knowing that second hand sale of goods or second hand sale of goods, mostly cars. So మన ఇండియాలో సెకండ్ హ్యాండ్ సేల్ ఆఫ్ కార్స్ బాగా కొంటుంటారు. దట్ ఈస్ ద మార్కెట్. So when the car is being sold at first hand, now you have included the value of car. Now when the same car is being sold in the second time, then if we include, then it leads to the problem of double counting. So anything that is leading to the problem of double counting should not be included in national income calculation. So these are the most important points which we has to keep in mind. Thank you. Then we will continue more such topics of on national income accounting. Thank you.